Your soulmate secretly tested your honesty and broke down in tears when they found out. There are moments in life when love speaks without making a sound. No arguments. No dramatic confessions. No grand gestures. Only silence. The kind of silence that quietly asks a question your lips never hear. Far away, someone who has carried your name in the deepest corners of their heart reached a crossroads. They had seen too much disappointment. Promises had been broken before. Trust had become something fragile, like thin glass balancing on the edge of a table. They wondered if honesty still existed. Not perfect honesty. Not flawless people. Just someone whose heart would remain truthful even when no one was watching. Without telling you, they began observing. Not to trap you. Not to embarrass you. But because hope had become too painful to give away freely. Life arranged ordinary moments that seemed completely unimportant. A forgotten message. A misunderstanding. An unexpected opportunity to lie. A chance to take credit for something you never did. A moment when nobody would have blamed you for choosing the easier path. These moments appeared random. But they were not random. Every decision quietly painted the portrait of your character. You never knew someone was watching from the distance. You simply remained yourself. Sometimes your honesty cost you opportunities. Sometimes it made people misunderstand your intentions. Sometimes it left you standing alone while others walked away with applause they had not earned. You questioned whether integrity even mattered anymore. Yet every time temptation whispered, something stronger answered. Your conscience. Not because you expected a reward. Not because you hoped someone would notice. But because your heart refused to become something it was never created to be. Unknown to you, every truthful decision reached another soul like gentle rain falling upon dry ground. They noticed patterns. You admitted mistakes instead of hiding them. You apologized without making excuses. You kept promises that nobody remembered except you. You remained kind even after experiencing rejection. Each moment quietly dismantled the walls they had spent years building around their heart. Still, they remained uncertain. Maybe it's coincidence, they whispered. Maybe everyone acts this way for a little while. So life presented one final moment. A decision that would reveal everything. No audience. No applause. No recognition. Only you. And your own reflection. You chose honesty again. Even though dishonesty would have been easier. Even though nobody would ever know. Except your own soul. That single decision echoed further than you could ever imagine. When they learned what you had done, they stopped breathing for a moment. Not because the act was dramatic. Because it was genuine. Real honesty has a quiet power. It asks for nothing. It proves everything. Tears slowly filled their eyes. Not tears of sadness. Not tears of regret. But tears that arrive when someone discovers the miracle they had almost stopped believing existed. They covered their face with trembling hands. Years of disappointment suddenly collided with one undeniable truth. Someone like you still existed. Someone whose character did not depend upon applause. Someone who protected truth even when truth offered no reward. Their carefully constructed emotional walls began collapsing one brick at a time. For years they had convinced themselves that trusting another heart would only invite more pain. Yet your unseen actions challenged every fearful conclusion they had accepted as reality. Hope returned quietly. Not loudly. Hope never shouts. It whispers. It says, "Perhaps love still has a chance." That whisper became impossible to ignore. The tears continued falling. Each tear carried away an old wound. Each breath released another memory of betrayal. For the first time in a long time, they smiled through their tears. Not because life had suddenly become perfect, but because the future no longer seemed empty. Without realizing it, your honesty became someone else's healing. You thought you were simply making ordinary choices. Yet every truthful step became proof that goodness still walks this earth. Sometimes we imagine destiny arriving through spectacular miracles. But destiny often enters quietly. One truthful conversation. One kept promise. One honest decision. One unseen sacrifice. Small moments. Eternal consequences. Your soulmate never expected perfection. Perfection cannot be trusted. It is honesty that creates safety. It is honesty that allows two imperfect hearts to become one unbreakable story. Tonight, while the world sleeps, they remember every detail. Every word. Every choice. Every silent act of integrity that revealed who you truly are. And with every memory, another tear falls. Not because they fear losing you, but because they finally understand something beautiful. The person they prayed for was becoming exactly the person they hoped still existed. They whisper your name into the quiet darkness. Not expecting an answer. Simply grateful that somewhere beneath the same sky, a truthful heart continues beating. And perhaps, without knowing why, you have recently felt an unusual peace. A quiet warmth. A sense that something invisible has shifted. Maybe it is because genuine love has already begun moving toward you. Long before either of you realizes your paths are finally about to meet. The following morning felt no different from any other. The sun rose without announcement, birds welcomed the light with familiar songs, and people hurried through their routines, unaware that somewhere, an invisible story was unfolding. You carried on as always, believing your quiet choices had disappeared into the past. Yet nothing sincere is ever truly forgotten. Across the distance, your soulmate sat in thoughtful silence. The memories of your actions replayed in their mind, not because they were extraordinary, but because they were authentic. In a world that often rewards appearances, you had unknowingly chosen substance. While many people polished their image, you had quietly protected your character. That realization touched a place inside them that had remained frozen for years. They remembered the countless times trust had been broken. They remembered promises that dissolved like mist at sunrise. They remembered believing kind words only to discover hidden motives. Every disappointment had taught them to expect less from people, until expecting nothing seemed safer. Then your honesty entered their life without asking for attention. It challenged every painful lesson they had accepted. For a long time, they resisted believing it. They searched for flaws, convinced that sooner or later another mask would fall. Yet every observation led to the same conclusion. Whether life became easy or difficult, your integrity remained steady. You treated strangers with respect. You admitted when you were wrong. You celebrated others without envy. You walked away from situations that demanded you compromise your values. Those choices became impossible to ignore. One evening, they looked out through a quiet window as rain gently tapped against the glass. The world outside seemed blurred, but for the first time in years, their heart felt unexpectedly clear. A single tear rolled down their cheek. Not because they felt weak, but because hope had quietly returned. Hope is unusual. It rarely arrives with loud celebrations. Instead, it enters softly, almost unnoticed, until one day you realize your heart is no longer carrying the same weight. That is exactly what happened to them. They whispered, "Maybe honesty still exists. Maybe love does not have to be built on fear." The word surprised even them. They had not spoken those thoughts aloud in years. As the days passed, they found themselves smiling more often. Small things that once seemed meaningless suddenly felt beautiful again. Morning sunlight across the floor. The scent of fresh rain. The laughter of children in a nearby park. Life itself appeared brighter because one hidden truth had changed everything. Your truth. Without intending to, you reminded someone that goodness still survives in ordinary people. You never imagined your quiet decisions could become another person's miracle. Yet miracles often begin where no audience is watching. Meanwhile, life continued preparing both of you. You faced your own challenges. There were moments when honesty seemed costly. Times when remaining truthful felt lonely. Opportunities slipped away because you refused shortcuts. Others questioned your choices, wondering why you continued taking the difficult path. You wondered too. Sometimes you asked yourself if integrity still mattered in a world obsessed with quick success. The answer had already begun unfolding, even though you could not yet see it. Every truthful step was leading you closer to someone whose heart had waited patiently for exactly that kind of person. Far away, your soulmate made a quiet promise to themselves. If our paths ever cross, I will never take this gift for granted. Those words carried no dramatic music, no audience, no applause. Only sincerity. They no longer prayed for perfection. Instead, they prayed for courage, the courage to trust again, to love again, and to open a heart that had remained guarded for far too long. Deep inside, they sensed that the next chapter of life would be different. Not easier. Not without challenges. But different in the most meaningful way. Because genuine love does not erase life's storms. It gives two people the strength to walk through them together. Unknown to both of you, destiny had already begun rearranging ordinary moments. Conversations that seemed accidental. Places visited without planning. Small delays. Unexpected changes. Every tiny detail moved like pieces of an invisible puzzle. Neither of you recognized the pattern yet. But the picture was slowly coming together. There would come a day when your eyes finally met. Perhaps in the most ordinary setting. Perhaps during a moment when neither of you expected anything remarkable. And when that day arrived, neither of you would fully understand why the connection felt so familiar. The answer would be hidden within all the unseen moments that came before. Within every truthful choice. Every silent sacrifice. Every act of kindness offered without expectation. Because love built on honesty never begins at the first conversation. It begins long before two people meet. It begins in the private decisions that shape who they become. And somewhere, as another quiet evening settled over the world, your soulmate closed their eyes with gratitude. The tears had stopped. In their place remained something far more powerful. Peace. Not the peace that comes from knowing every answer, but the peace that comes from believing the future still holds something beautiful. For the first time in years, they no longer feared what tomorrow might bring. They welcomed it. Because somewhere beneath the same endless sky, a truthful heart continued beating. And that heart was slowly finding its way home. Days passed, but something had changed in ways neither of you could explain. You continued living your life, unaware that every quiet act of integrity had become part of another person's healing journey. You never looked over your shoulder, wondering who might be watching. You simply chose to remain true to yourself, believing that character mattered most when no applause followed. Meanwhile, your soulmate found themselves returning to those memories again and again. Not because they were searching for flaws anymore, but because every memory reminded them that genuine honesty leaves a lasting impression. One evening, they opened an old journal that had remained untouched for years. Dust covered the edges, and the pages carried the weight of forgotten seasons. Inside were words written during nights of heartbreak, disappointment, and unanswered questions. One sentence caught their attention. If I ever meet someone whose heart values truth more than comfort, I will never let fear steal that blessing. They stared at those words for a long time. When they had written them, they believed such a person might never exist. Now, they were no longer certain. Slowly, tears gathered once more. Not because they were hurting, but because hope has a way of softening even the strongest walls. They closed the journal gently and whispered into the quiet room. Maybe this is the answer I have been waiting for. Outside, the evening sky glowed with shades of gold and deep blue. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh rain, as though nature itself was quietly celebrating a promise that had not yet been spoken. Far away, you faced a challenge of your own. Someone offered you an easier path. A shortcut. A chance to gain something valuable without anyone discovering the truth. For a brief moment, the temptation felt real. After all, who would know? Who would question it? Who would ever find out? But your heart answered before your mind could. You chose the harder road. Not because it guaranteed success. Not because someone might reward you. But because you had learned that peace is worth more than temporary victories. You walked away with less than you could have gained. Yet you carried something far greater. A clear conscience. At that very moment, though miles separated you, your soulmate felt an unexplainable calm. They could not explain why. It was as if an invisible thread connecting two hearts had gently tightened. They smiled without knowing the reason. Sometimes souls recognize each other before names are ever exchanged. Sometimes destiny whispers long before life allows two people to meet. The following days brought unexpected moments. You encouraged someone who had almost given up. You listened instead of judging. You forgave someone who never apologized. None of these actions seemed important to you. They were simply reflections of the person you had chosen to become. Yet every quiet decision strengthened a story that destiny was patiently writing. Your soulmate noticed another change within themselves. The fear that once controlled every relationship had begun to disappear. They no longer expected betrayal in every conversation. They no longer searched every smile for hidden intentions. Instead, they found themselves believing something they had almost forgotten. That trust could grow again. Not overnight. Not without wisdom. But slowly. Like the first light before sunrise. One night they looked toward the stars and spoke softly. If we are truly meant to meet, let our paths cross at the perfect time. The words floated into the stillness. No dramatic sign appeared. No voice answered. Only peace settled over their heart. And somehow, that was enough. Because real faith does not demand immediate proof. It chooses patience. As another chapter of life unfolded, invisible doors quietly began opening. Plans changed. Schedules shifted. Unexpected invitations appeared. Simple decisions redirected familiar routines. To everyone else, these were ordinary events. But unseen hands were arranging every detail with remarkable precision. Neither of you realized it yet. Each step was bringing your stories closer together. Not through coincidence, but through countless moments of unseen preparation. The greatest connections are rarely rushed. They are shaped through seasons of growth, healing, and quiet transformation. Your honesty had already become the foundation of something neither of you could yet see. And somewhere, in the stillness of another evening, your soulmate looked into the mirror. For the first time in years, the reflection staring back no longer carried only old wounds. It carried expectation. A quiet belief that love built on truth was not merely a dream. It was becoming possible. With gentle gratitude, they closed their eyes and whispered one final thought before sleep claimed the night. Whoever you are, thank you for choosing honesty when no one was watching. One day, I hope I can thank you in person. The stars remained silent. But somewhere beneath that same endless sky, another truthful heart continued its journey. The seasons continued to change. Days became weeks, and weeks quietly folded into months. Life moved with its familiar rhythm, carrying both joy and uncertainty. You remained focused on your responsibilities, never realizing that every chapter of your journey was shaping the person you were becoming. Your soulmate was changing too. Not because someone forced them to, Not because they had all the answers, but because your unseen honesty had awakened something inside them that had long been asleep. For years, they believed love was something fragile. A beautiful dream that always seemed to disappear the moment they reached for it. They had watched people make promises they never intended to keep. They had trusted words that were never supported by actions. Eventually, they stopped expecting sincerity. Until your quiet character began rewriting everything they thought they knew. One peaceful evening, they sat beside a window as the sky slowly turned from gold to deep violet. The world outside was calm, and for the first time in many years, their heart matched that calmness. They whispered softly, "If someone can stay honest when no one is watching, perhaps they can stay loyal when life becomes difficult." That single thought changed everything. Because loyalty is not built in dramatic moments. It is built in ordinary choices. The choices nobody applauds. The decisions that reveal who a person truly is. Far away, you were facing another test. Someone misunderstood your intentions. False assumptions spread quickly, and for a brief moment you had the opportunity to defend yourself by placing the blame on someone else. No one would have questioned you. It would have been the easiest solution. Instead, you chose patience. You spoke only the truth. You refused to damage another person's reputation simply to protect your own. The misunderstanding eventually faded.